The galaxy was wide and bright, filled with countless stars and civilizations. In one quiet corner, far from the busy trade routes, the Nivaran Alliance lived in peace. Their people were gentle, known for art, culture, and harmony. They had not fought a war in many generations. But peace could be fragile, and one day it shattered. From the dark edges of space came the Korth, a ruthless raiding species with burning ships and no mercy in their hearts. The Korth wanted resources, slaves, and power. They attacked without warning, tearing through Nivaran colonies. Cities burned, families fled, and entire worlds fell silent. The Nivaran leaders were desperate. They gathered in their great council chamber, their faces pale and eyes full of fear. They sent out a universal distress call, a plea for help that echoed across the stars. They begged for mercy, begged for aid, begged for someone to come. But the great powers of the galaxy looked away. The wealthy trade empires did not want to risk their fleets. The old warrior races had grown too proud to fight for strangers. To many, the Nivaran were too weak to save, too far away to matter. But the signal did not vanish. It traveled, carried on cosmic waves until it reached a small blue planet near the edge of known space. On Earth, the signal was captured by the Deep Space Network. In the control room of a quiet base in Arizona, a group of scientists stared at the strange message. It was broken, full of static, but the meaning was clear. Someone was begging for help. A young technician named Rachel Morgan pressed her headset closer and whispered, "It's real. Someone out there is calling for help." The signal was passed on to the right people. In Washington and Geneva and London, leaders argued. Some said Earth should stay quiet. They said Earth was not ready for such dangers. But others believed the world had a duty. Humanity had always been shaped by struggle. The planet itself was harsh, filled with storms, earthquakes, predators, and sickness. To live on Earth meant to endure and fight. Many called humans Deathworlders, for they came from one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy. And it was true. Earth had made its people strong. One man who listened closely was Captain Daniel Brooks. He was a veteran explorer, commander of the starship Endurance. Daniel was not young, but his eyes were sharp and steady. He read the Nivaran plea and felt something stir in his chest. He remembered the faces of refugees he had once rescued after a pirate raid. He remembered standing in ruined towns on faraway moons. He could not ignore this call. "If no one else will answer," Daniel said to his crew, "then we will." Maria Torres, the ship's engineer, looked up from her console. Her dark hair was tied back, her hands stained with grease. She was practical, often cautious, but her heart was big. "Captain," she said softly, "you know the risks. If the Korth are as strong as the reports say, this could be suicide." Daniel nodded. "I know, but if we do nothing, the Nivaran will fall. Sometimes doing the right thing means walking into danger." Alex Carter, the security chief, leaned against the wall. He was a tall man with a soldier's posture. He had once served as a Marine before joining the Endurance. His life had been spent in battlefields, deserts, and jungles. He gave a small smile, grim but proud. "Then count me in, Captain. If someone's bullying the weak, it's our job to hit back." Rachel Morgan, the science officer who first heard the signal, felt her chest tighten. She was younger than the others, still full of wonder about the stars. But she could not shake the sound of fear in the Nivaran voices. "We can't ignore them," she whispered. "We'd want someone to come for us if it was Earth crying out." Daniel placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Exactly. That is why we go." The crew gathered in the main hall of the ship. The Endurance was not the largest vessel in Earth's fleet, nor the most advanced. But it was tough, built for long journeys with strong armor and a brave crew. Daniel explained the mission. He told them about the Nivaran, about the Korth, and about the silence of the galaxy. Some of the crew looked afraid, but not one of them walked away. They were human, and humans did not turn their backs on cries for help. Preparations began at once. Maria worked day and night in the engine room, tuning the warp drives and reinforcing the hull. She knew the ship would need every bit of speed and strength. Alex trained the small security team, drilling them in both defense and attack. He showed them tricks learned from Earth's long history of war. Rachel pored over the data, learning about the Nivaran, their biology, their culture, and what might help them survive. Daniel studied maps of space, plotting a course through dangerous routes that would avoid detection until they reached the Alliance. The day of departure came. The Endurance lifted from Earth, its engines glowing as it climbed through the sky. Families waved from the launch platform, though their hearts were heavy. Everyone knew the risks. Some whispered that the crew would never return. Others whispered that if anyone could stand against the Korth, it was humans. The ship pierced through the clouds, past the blue atmosphere, and into the black sea of stars. Ahead lay danger, but also hope. For days, the Endurance traveled through the void. The crew kept busy, checking weapons, running drills, and sharing quiet meals. At night, Daniel stood on the observation deck, gazing at the stars. He thought about the Neveran children, running in panic as fire fell from the sky. He thought about the silence of the great empires who did nothing. His jaw tightened. Earth had always been small in galactic eyes, but maybe that was why it mattered. They knew what it was to fight when no one else believed in them. Maria sat in the engine room, wiping sweat from her forehead. She remembered her childhood in New Mexico, where storms would tear across the desert and leave homes in ruins. Her family always rebuilt, brick by brick. She thought of the Nevaran rebuilding too, if only they survived. She whispered a small prayer and tightened another bolt. Alex sat with his squad, telling them stories of Earth. He told them about wolves hunting in packs, about soldiers standing firm in the mud of old wars, about people surviving winters where even the air froze. The younger crew listened wide-eyed. "That's what it means to be human," Alex said. "We don't quit. Not ever." Rachel spent long hours in the lab, listening again and again to the Nevaran distress call. She tried to clean the static, to hear every detail. Sometimes she cried alone, hearing the desperation in alien voices. But then she would wipe her eyes and get back to work. She believed that knowledge could save lives. If she learned enough, maybe she could make a difference when they arrived. Finally, the Endurance neared the edge of Nevaran space. Sensors showed wreckage drifting in the void, burned ships, broken stations, frozen bodies. The crew fell silent as the images filled the screens. "This is what we're walking into," Daniel said quietly. His voice was heavy, but his eyes were hard as steel. "But we are not too late. As long as one colony stands, as long as one family breathes, we still have a chance." The ship moved forward, into danger. The crew tightened their belts, checked their weapons, and steadied their hearts. No one knew what waited for them, but they knew why they were there. Far away in a ruined council chamber, the Nevaran still waited. They whispered to each other that no one would come. Their leaders sat with heads bowed, ready for the end. But then a voice crackled through their broken comms. A human voice, steady and clear. "This is Captain Daniel Brooks of the Starship Endurance. We heard your call. You are not alone." For the first time in many weeks, hope flickered in Nevaran eyes. The Endurance entered Nevaran space, its engines dimming as it slowed near the first colony. The screens showed fire-scorched landscapes, ruined buildings, and frightened faces hiding in the shadows. The Nevaran were tall, graceful beings with pale skin and wide eyes, but now those eyes were filled with fear. They had sent their desperate call across the stars, but they had never expected humans to be the ones who came. Inside the council hall of the surviving colony, the leaders gathered. Their robes were torn, their voices weak. They had lost too many people already, and their fleets were shattered. When the guards rushed in saying a strange ship had arrived, the leaders looked at each other with disbelief. They had begged the great empires for help, yet none had answered. Who would risk themselves for a small alliance like theirs? But the guards repeated their words. A ship had landed. Outsiders had come. Captain Daniel Brooks stepped down from the ramp of the Endurance. He was not dressed in rich robes or decorated armor. He wore the simple uniform of Earth's explorers, marked only by the flag of his homeworld. Behind him walked Maria Torres, Rachel Morgan, and Alex Carter. The rest of the human crew stayed with the ship, ready to move supplies. The air was heavy with smoke and dust, and the ground was still scarred from recent battles. The people of the colony stared at the humans in silence, whispering among themselves. "Are they mercenaries?" one Nevaran elder asked in a trembling voice. "Or scavengers come to pick our bones?" "No," another elder whispered, his gaze sharp. "Look at their eyes. They are different." Daniel walked forward, his boots crunching on broken stone. He bowed his head slightly, showing respect. His voice was steady and clear. "We are from Earth. We heard your call for help. We have come." The room fell silent. A ripple of shock spread through the council. Many of them had heard whispers of Earth. They knew the old stories passed along trade routes about a harsh world full of storms and predators. They had heard the name Deathworlders spoken with both fear and awe. And now, here they stood in the flesh. One of the younger leaders, a woman named Elira, stepped forward. Her voice shook as she spoke. No one else answered. "Why did you come?" Daniel looked at her and answered simply, "Because you asked." The elders stared at him as though he had spoken an impossible truth. Around them, refugees leaned closer, hope flickering for the first time in weeks. Maria stepped forward, holding a small device. "We brought supplies," she said, her voice firm but warm. "Water purifiers, portable generators, medicine. It's not much, but it will help," Rachel added softly. "We studied your biology on the way here. I can prepare treatments for injuries and sickness. I can show your doctors how to use what we have." Alex's voice was rough but calm. "I'll train whoever is willing to defend this place. You don't have to face the Korth alone anymore." The words spread quickly through the hall and whispers grew into gasps. The Deathworlders had come not to conquer but to fight alongside them. Soon the humans were working among the refugees. Maria crawled into broken machines, her hands flying as she repaired water systems and patched power grids with whatever scraps she could find. Rachel moved from one shelter to another, giving medicine, checking wounds, and comforting children who cried in the night. She spoke gently, her soft voice calming even those who did not understand her words. Alex gathered a group of young Nivaran, their hands trembling as they held weapons for the first time. He taught them to aim, to move quietly, to fight smart. They learned quickly, though fear still lived in their eyes. At first, some Nivaran watched from a distance, unsure whether to trust the humans. They had heard stories of Deathworlders being brutal, even dangerous. But as the days passed, doubt turned to awe. They saw Maria lifting heavy panels with sweat running down her face, never stopping until the lights came back on. They saw Rachel kneeling beside the wounded, staying awake all night to save lives. They saw Alex taking blows in training so that the young ones would not be hurt, his voice sharp but encouraging. And above all, they saw Daniel moving among his crew and the Nivaran with calm steadiness, always ready to listen, always ready to act. One evening, Elira sat with Daniel outside the council hall. The stars above burned brightly, though smoke still clung to the sky. She studied him quietly before asking, "Why does your world make such people? You fight with a fire I do not understand." Daniel looked up at the stars, remembering storms on the oceans, wildfires in the forests, and deserts that could kill in a day. "Because our world has always tried to break us," he said slowly. "Every day something on Earth can kill you. But we survive. We adapt, we fight. It has made us strong." Elira shivered. "Deathworlders," she whispered. "The word is true. But perhaps it is not something to fear." The next morning, scouts rushed back to the colony with grim news. The Korth had been seen near the outer moons. Their ships were gathering, preparing for another attack. Fear swept through the colony like a cold wind. Families clutched each other and the leaders whispered of retreat, though there was nowhere left to run. Alex stood before the frightened crowd, his voice like iron. "The Korth are coming," he said. "Then let them come. We will meet them here. We will show them this colony is not theirs to take." Some of the Nivaran muttered in despair, but others clenched their fists. Rachel stepped forward and said, "We cannot promise it will be easy, but we promise this. You are not alone anymore." Maria held up a crude explosive she had built from spare parts. "We can fight them with more than fear. We can fight them with fire." Daniel raised his hand, his calm voice cutting through the murmurs. "We cannot run. We cannot hide. But we can stand. If you choose to fight with us, we will show the Korth that Deathworlders are not the only ones with strength. Together we will make them bleed." The crowd grew quiet, then a single voice shouted, "We will fight." Another followed and another until the hall shook with the sound of Nivaran voices roaring with new courage. For the first time they believed they might survive. That night humans and Nivaran worked side by side. Alex drilled squads in the shadows of ruined streets, teaching them to move like hunters. Maria showed engineers how to turn broken reactors into powerful mines. Rachel trained healers in first aid, preparing them for the wounded who would surely come. Daniel walked among them all, giving strength with his calm presence. From orbit, the stars glimmered cold and distant. The Korth fleet began its slow approach, confident in its strength. But below, in the ruins of a fragile world, humans and Nivaran prepared for war together. The Deathworlders had arrived, and for the first time the Korth would learn what that meant. The Korth ships came out of the void like dark shadows. Their hulls were jagged, their weapons glowing red, and their movements full of menace. The people of the colony froze in fear as alarms sounded across the settlement. In the command center, Daniel Brooks stood before the main screen, his face calm even as danger drew near. Maria Torres sat at the console beside him, scanning energy signatures, while Rachel Morgan tried to keep the comms open with the scattered defense posts. Alex Carter was already out in the field with the newly trained Niveran volunteers ready to fight. The Korth fleet outnumbered anything the humans and Niveran could gather. 5 warships circled the planet, preparing to send landing parties. The defenders had only the Endurance, a few battered Nivaran ships, and makeshift weapons built from scraps. Still, no one spoke of surrender. The humans had promised to stand with the Niveran, and now they would keep that promise. On the ground, Alex crouched in the shadows of a ruined building with a group of young Niveran fighters. Their hands shook as they gripped their weapons. Alex whispered, "Steady. Don't waste your shots. You fight smart, not loud. Remember the traps." The traps had been Maria's idea, with Alex helping to design them. The Niveran forests were thick with roots and branches, and the humans had shown how to turn the land itself into a weapon. Hidden pits lined with sharpened stakes, explosive mines disguised under leaves, and collapsing structures were all waiting for the enemy. The Nivaran had never imagined such tactics, but now they looked at their Deathworlder allies with new respect. Above the planet, Daniel guided the Endurance into a daring maneuver. The ship shot between 2 Korth frigates, its shields straining as plasma fire rained down. Maria shouted, "Shields holding, but not for long." Daniel's voice was steady. "We don't need them to hold forever. Just long enough to strike." He ordered a sudden roll, bringing the ship's weapons to bear. Missiles streaked out, slamming into the engines of one frigate. The enemy ship spun out of formation, burning as it fell toward the atmosphere. Cheers erupted across the comms, but Daniel's voice cut through. "Stay sharp. That was only the beginning." On the ground, the Korth troops landed in dropships. They were large, armored, and cruel, their weapons heavy and deadly. They expected another easy raid, another weak colony too afraid to resist. Instead, they met fire from the ruins. Alex shouted the order, and the Niveran fighters opened fire from hidden positions. The first wave of Korth stumbled as mines exploded beneath them. Traps snapped shut, tearing through armor. From the shadows, the Deathworlders and their allies struck like predators. Rachel worked in a makeshift clinic near the center of the colony. Wounded fighters were carried in, their bodies burned and bleeding. Her hands moved quickly, steady and focused as she gave medicine and bandaged wounds. She taught Niveran healers how to work beside her, showing them tricks that Earth's doctors had used in war zones for centuries. Her voice was calm even when her heart raced. "You're going to be all right," she whispered again and again. Maria stayed on the comms, directing engineers and volunteers to set off explosive charges at just the right moment. One group of Korth troops marched into an abandoned factory thinking it was empty. Maria's voice crackled in Alex's earpiece. "Now!" The factory lit up in fire as the charges went off, collapsing the structure and burying the invaders. The ground shook and smoke filled the air. Still, the Korth pressed forward. Their ships pounded the surface with bombardments, sending shockwaves through the colony. Families huddled in underground shelters, listening to the war above them. Fear clawed at their hearts, but when they heard human voices over the speakers, they clung to hope. "Hold the line," Daniel's voice echoed. "You are not alone." The battle stretched on for hours. In the forests, Alex led his fighters in small, sharp ambushes. They would strike from cover, melt away, then strike again. The Korth grew frustrated, firing wildly, but their strength began to crack. In the command center, Maria and Daniel guided the Endurance into another attack, ramming one enemy ship and boarding it with shock troops. The humans fought hand-to-hand in the narrow halls, their strength and fury shocking the enemy. The Korth had never seen such ferocity from so few. Rachel wiped sweat from her forehead as she leaned over another patient. She felt exhaustion pulling at her, but she refused to stop. Every life saved was another reason the fight must go on. When she saw young Niveran soldiers return from battle, their eyes full of determination instead of fear, she felt her heart lift. The Deathworlders were not just fighting for them. They were changing them. The turning point came when Maria's trap in orbit was triggered. She had been working with Niveran engineers for days to prepare it. They had hidden explosive devices on a cluster of asteroids waiting for the right moment. As the largest Korth ship moved into range, Maria gave the order. The asteroids exploded forward, slamming into the warship's shields. The impact tore holes in the armor, and the Endurance swooped in to finish the job with a barrage of missiles. The great ship broke apart, burning as it fell. The sight of their flagship destroyed shook the Korth. Their troops on the ground hesitated, their confidence shaken. Alex seized the moment. "Push them back," he shouted. The Niveran fighters surged forward, their voices rising in a roar. For the first time, they were not just defending, they were fighting to win. In the sky, the remaining Korth ships began to retreat. On the ground, the surviving troops pulled back to their dropships, firing wildly as they fled. The defenders cheered as the enemy ships lifted away, vanishing into the dark. The colony stood battered but unbroken. Silence fell across the battlefield. The Nivaran stared at the humans, their expressions a mixture of awe and gratitude. They had thought the Deathworlders were monsters, beings to be feared. But now they saw the truth. These humans were fierce, yes, but their fierceness was not cruelty. It was protection, born of a world that demanded strength. They had shared that strength, and it had saved the Nivaran. As dawn broke over the ruined colony, Daniel stood on the council steps. Around him gathered Maria, Rachel, Alex, and the Nivaran leaders. Families began to emerge from shelters, blinking in the light, their children clutching their hands. For the first time in weeks, the air was filled not with fear, but with hope. Daniel's voice carried across the crowd. "This battle is over, but the war is not. The Korth will come again. But now they know this world is not alone. They know that Deathworlders will stand with you." Elira, the Nivaran leader, stepped forward with tears in her eyes. She bowed deeply to the humans. "You have given us more than survival. You have given us courage. We will not forget." Rachel felt her throat tighten as she looked at the faces of the children. Maria placed a hand on her shoulder, and Alex gave a tired but proud nod. They had survived the first true test. They had proven that even in the face of overwhelming power, the will to fight could turn fear into strength. The humans and Nivaran began to rebuild together, but all knew the war was not finished. In the distant stars, the Korth licked their wounds, vowing revenge. Yet the galaxy had heard whispers. Deathworlders had fought back. Deathworlders had won, and that story was only beginning. The colony was quiet after the battle, but it was the silence of exhaustion, not despair. The Nivaran survivors moved through the ruins with renewed purpose. They cleaned the streets, buried the fallen, and rebuilt their shelters. Everywhere they went, they saw humans working beside them. Maria Torres helped repair broken reactors. Rachel Morgan guided young healers. Alex Carter drilled squads in new tactics, and Captain Daniel Brooks walked among the people, speaking with calm strength. For the first time in many weeks, the Nivaran were not bowed by fear. They stood taller, inspired by the presence of their unlikely allies. But the Korth were not finished. From their hidden bases among the stars, the raiders seethed with rage. They had been humiliated. They had lost a flagship and suffered defeat at the hands of a world they had considered savage. To them, the idea that humans, Deathworlders, could stand against them was an insult. They promised to return in greater force, and their threats spread across the galaxy. Whispers traveled faster than ships. Traders told stories in marketplaces. Spies carried rumors to their masters. The tale of Earth's Deathworlders reached the great halls of the powerful empires. Some laughed, dismissing the humans as reckless. Others frowned, wondering what it meant if a small world could achieve what greater powers would not. The galaxy had ignored the Nivaran plea, but now the galaxy could not ignore the answer. In the colony, preparations continued. Alex Carter stood before a group of young Nivaran fighters, his voice steady. "You have faced them once. You know they bleed. You know they can be beaten. Do not forget that. Courage is a weapon too." His words sank deep, and the Nivaran began to train with sharper focus. They had learned from the humans that survival was not enough. They had to resist. Rachel worked day and night with the Nivaran healers. She showed them how to mix medicine from local plants, how to clean wounds with boiling water, how to fight infection with simple tools. They were amazed by the Deathworlders' knowledge. She smiled softly at their awe. "We've had to learn," she said. "Our world is full of sickness and danger. We survive because we adapt." Maria spent long hours with the engineers, showing them how to strengthen defenses. She explained how to wire explosives, how to fortify shelters, how to keep machines running with limited parts. The Nivaran engineers listened carefully, their respect growing as they realized how much she could do with so little. "Your world must be very hard," one said. Maria wiped sweat from her brow and nodded. "It is, but it made us strong." Daniel moved among the council and the people, always calm, always steady. He listened to their fears and gave them hope. When they doubted themselves, he reminded them of what they had already survived. "You are still here," he told them. "That means you are stronger than you know." His quiet confidence spread like fire through dry grass, lifting spirits wherever he went. Then the Korth returned. Not with 5 ships, but with 10. Their fleet burned against the stars, a wall of metal and fire. They broadcast a message to the colony, their voices filled with contempt. "Surrender the humans. Give us the Deathworlders and we will spare the rest." The council trembled, their faces pale. Some whispered that perhaps the humans should leave, that perhaps it was too dangerous to resist further. But before fear could spread, Daniel stepped forward. He pressed the comm button and spoke to the enemy fleet with a voice like iron. "Earth does not surrender. We stand together with the Nivaran. If you want us, come and take us." The message spread across the colony. Refugees lifted their heads. Soldiers gripped their weapons tighter. For the first time, they believed not only that survival was possible, but that victory was worth fighting for. When the Korth attacked, the humans and Nivaran were ready. The orbital traps were armed, the ground defenses prepared, the fighters trained. The first blasts rocked the colony, but the defenders held firm. Maria triggered mines that split enemy troops apart. Rachel treated the wounded under fire, never flinching as explosions shook the ground. Alex led squads in ambushes, striking hard and vanishing before the enemy could react. Daniel guided the Endurance through the thick of battle, ramming ships twice its size, refusing to back down. At one point, the Korth commander broadcast another demand. His voice was cold, mocking. "You are Deathworlders, yes, but you are few. You cannot win." Daniel's reply was calm, but his eyes blazed. "Perhaps, but you have already lost, because now the Nivaran are not afraid." On the ground, Elira, the young Nivaran leader, stood before her people. She replayed recordings Rachel had shared, images of Earth's storms, its predators, its endless struggles. The Nivaran saw lightning tearing the sky, floods sweeping across land, earthquakes shaking cities, volcanoes erupting with fire. They saw humans enduring it all, refusing to bow. "This is what shaped them," Elira told her people. "This is why they stand unbroken. And now they fight for us. Let us fight with them." The Nivaran roared in agreement, their courage ignited. They charged into battle not as victims but as warriors. Side by side with the humans, they drove the Korth back step by step. The battle raged for hours. In the skies, Maria's asteroid sling was unleashed again, hurling rocks at enemy ships. One Korth cruiser broke apart under the impact and the others faltered. On the ground, Alex and his fighters sprang traps that collapsed buildings onto enemy squads. Rachel worked with such determination that even the most hopelessly wounded clung to life, inspired by her calm strength. And Daniel, at the heart of it all, never stopped guiding, never stopped fighting. Finally, as the second dawn rose over the battered colony, the Korth faltered. Their losses were too great, their morale too shaken. With rage and shame, they began to retreat. Their ships pulled back into the void, leaving behind burning wrecks and broken troops. The defenders stood bruised but victorious. When the smoke cleared, the Nivaran gathered in the great square. The humans stood among them, tired but unbowed. The crowd cheered, their voices echoing through the ruins. For the first time in memory, the Nivaran felt not like prey but like fighters. Elira stepped forward again. She looked at the humans with deep respect. "At first we feared you. We thought Deathworlders were monsters. But you are protectors. You are the fire that shields instead of burns. You have given us strength we did not know we had." Daniel inclined his head. "We did not come to lead you. We came because you asked for help, and we will stay as long as we are needed." Rachel, Maria, and Alex stood beside him, their clothes torn and their faces weary, but their eyes shining with pride. The Nivaran bowed to them, not in fear but in respect. Across the galaxy, the whispers grew louder. Other civilizations who had ignored the call now listened. The Korth had been beaten twice, not by great empires, but by humans and a small alliance of survivors. Some began to fear what humanity might become. Others began to hope. The Deathworlders had turned fear into respect, and the galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. The battlefield lay quiet. Smoke curled from ruined buildings and the air smelled of ash and metal. The Nivaran walked through the wreckage with heavy steps, but their shoulders no longer bent under fear. They had fought beside humans and survived. The Korth had retreated again, humiliated, leaving behind wreckage that would serve as a warning. For the first time, the Niviren felt a sense of strength in their own hearts. They were not helpless anymore. Captain Daniel Brooks stood on the steps of the council hall, his uniform torn and marked with soot. Around him were Maria Torres, Rachel Morgan, and Alex Carter. The Niviren leaders gathered with them. Families emerged from the shelters, children clutching their parents, their wide eyes watching the humans with awe. A hush fell over the crowd as Daniel lifted his hand for silence. "You called for help," Daniel said in a calm but firm voice. "No one came. No one but us. But today you stood with us. You fought. And you won. Remember this day. Remember that you are not weak. You are not forgotten." His words carried over the ruins strong and steady. A murmur rippled through the people, then grew louder until the square rang with cheers. Niviren voices shouted in unity, no longer trembling. Rachel felt her chest tighten as she listened to the roar of hope. She looked at the children in the crowd and saw something new in their eyes. Not fear, but pride. She whispered to Maria, "They believe now." Maria gave a tired but proud smile. "They should. They've earned it." Alex stood a little apart, watching the young fighters who had once been scared and shaky. Now they stood tall, their weapons held with confidence. He nodded to himself. "They'll be ready next time," he muttered. He hoped there wouldn't be a next time, but he knew the Korth would not forget this humiliation. Later that day, a ceremony was held in the square. The Niviren carved a memorial stone from the ruins of the council hall. On it, they engraved words in their own language and in English. "Only Earth answered our plea." The people placed flowers at its base and candles burned brightly in the dark. Families touched the stone with trembling hands, tears streaming down their faces. For them, it was more than stone. It was a promise. They would never forget who came when no one else would. Daniel stood with Elira, the young Niviren leader, watching as the people gathered. Elira's voice was soft but full of respect. "Your world has changed us. We were broken. Now we are not. We will never forget what Deathworlders did here." Daniel gave a small nod. "You did not just survive because of us. You survived because you chose to fight. That strength was always inside you." Elira looked at him with quiet awe. "Perhaps, but it took you to show us." As days passed, the work of rebuilding began. Maria worked with Niviren engineers to restore power and water. She showed them how to create stronger defenses, using scraps of metal and pieces of wrecked Korth ships. Rachel organized clinics, teaching healers to make medicines and showing mothers how to keep their children safe. Alex drilled squads every day, shaping them into fighters who would not run the next time war came. And Daniel met with the council to help plan not just survival but resistance. The bond between humans and Niviren grew strong. They ate together, worked together, and laughed together. At night, around small fires, they told stories. The Niviren shared tales of ancient peace, of their art and music. The humans shared stories of Earth, of storms, deserts, mountains, and oceans. The Niviren listened wide-eyed as Rachel spoke of Earth's wild animals. They gasped at tales of wolves, lions, and sharks. They shivered when Maria described earthquakes and hurricanes. And they fell silent when Daniel spoke of Earth's long wars. "Our world never gave us peace," Daniel said. "It gave us struggle. And in that struggle, we learned who we are." The Niviren began to see the humans not just as warriors, but as survivors who carried kindness in their strength. They saw Rachel comforting children, Maria fixing broken lights, Alex protecting the weak, and Daniel guiding them with calm resolve. Fear turned into respect, and respect turned into trust. But beyond the colony, the galaxy was watching. The story of Earth's answer spread like fire. Traders carried it to distant ports. Refugees whispered it across the stars. Even the halls of the great empires echoed with the words, "Deathworlders had fought back and won." Some rulers grew uneasy. If humans could inspire courage in others, their power might spread. Others felt a spark of hope. If Earth could stand up to the Korth, perhaps others could too. In the Korth strongholds, rage boiled. Commanders struck their claws against metal walls, vowing vengeance. They swore they would return with fleets so vast that no colony could resist. But deep down, unease gnawed at them. They had seen something they could not understand. Deathworlders who fought not just with strength but with fire in their souls. And worse, they had spread that fire to others. One evening, Daniel stood alone on the observation deck of the Endurance. The stars stretched endlessly before him. Maria joined him quietly, leaning on the railing. "Do you think they'll come back soon?" she asked. Daniel's eyes stayed on the stars. "Yes, but so will we." Rachel entered, carrying her datapad. "I've been working on plans to share with other colonies," she said softly. "Medicine, training, defenses. If the Nivaran can learn, others can too." Alex followed, his steps heavy but steady. "If the Corps thought this was easy before, they'll know better now. Next time they'll be cautious. And next time we'll be stronger." Daniel turned to his crew, his family. "This was never just about one colony. It's about showing the galaxy that when someone cries for help, there is always a choice. We chose to answer." His voice was quiet, but it carried weight. They all felt it. Weeks later, the colony held a great gathering. The people unveiled their rebuilt council hall. At the center stood the memorial stone shining in the light. The words carved upon it glowed softly. "Only Earth answered our plea." The humans stood before it, humbled by the honor. Children placed garlands of flowers around their necks, and elders bowed deeply. The Nivaran sang songs of gratitude, their voices rising to the stars. Rachel wiped tears from her eyes. Maria smiled as children tugged at her hands. Alex stood tall, his arms crossed, but even he allowed himself a small grin. And Daniel, standing with them, felt pride swell in his chest. They had come as strangers, feared as Deathworlders. They would leave as friends, remembered as protectors. When the Endurance finally prepared to depart, the entire colony gathered to watch. Illyra stepped forward, holding a carved pendant of Nivaran stone. She placed it in Daniel's hand. "A piece of our world," she said. "So you will never forget us." "Yes, we will never forget you." Daniel closed his hand around it and nodded. "We will carry it always." As the ship lifted into the sky, the crowd waved and cheered. The words echoed through the comms, carried on every voice. "Only Earth answered." The chant rose higher and higher until it filled the heavens. The Endurance climbed into the black, its engines blazing. The stars stretched before them, wide and endless. They knew the fight was not over. The Corps would return and new dangers would rise. But they also knew this truth. When the galaxy turned away, Earth's Deathworlders would not. They would answer. They would stand. They would endure. And so the story of the Deathworlders spread, written not in fear but in hope. A plea had gone out into the stars, and only Earth had answered. The galaxy would never forget.